Alright, so since I didn't actually add a real-time footage part to any of my episodes lately, I just wanted to quickly show off what the city looks like at the moment, and maybe talk a little bit about what I want to do in the future. I'm sorry about the frame rate, by the way. At least it might comfort you to know that it's been far worse. It's actually pretty good at the moment, and I'm quite happy to have 8 frames per second. I'm sorry about the seagulls too, I still need to get the mod for that. But yeah, this is what the city currently looks like. The episode took a little bit longer than I expected, since I really wanted to add a bit of additional detailing. Not just the path elements, I mean the textures on the roads, and making sure that I got the brick roads to get that more traditional look going, but also to make it look more alive. So adding little picnic places and some quote-unquote restaurants, not actual restaurants, but making some small plazas look like there are restaurants, stuff like that, to just make the city feel more alive. But yeah, this is the overall city at the moment. This is the star shape in its full glory. I do have to say, this isn't entirely probably what it's going to look like in the end, since I may very well change the way that everything pretty much around the star shape looks, because I haven't gone into older houses around here, because historically I do want to get into maybe some smaller older houses, maybe a small port with some boats. Really, boats is something that I should get into as well, and some sort of fields or parks around it. Especially this corner over here is something which I haven't done anything with so far. But this should be the center of the city. Definitely the center is nearly finished. Might add some extra details. I've got a slight issue with the scaling, but otherwise I'm quite happy with how it turned out in the end. And especially I feel the street textures really helped to make the city feel much more alive. The very basic idea of Willemstad you can kind of see over here, since it has that sort of middle boulevard over here, which is where I really wanted to have the fanciest buildings, and the very, I do have to say, Amsterdam-ish facades around the sides. The buildings, and this is my main scaling issue, which you can not see too clearly in the time lapses, but probably see quite clearly in this real-time part, is that some of these buildings are somewhat large, and it's not too big of an issue. I do think they're alright in terms of scale. The only issue is that they're not quite consistent. As you can see, these houses over here are incredibly small, so I've also sort of gradually started removing these houses from the city and replacing them with these other ones. But these are much more like larger Amsterdam-ish facades that you would find in larger cities, and not a small well, star fort like this. And it's just a small touch. I still feel like overall, especially this main sort of area over here and the canal, feels really Dutch, but it's not entirely the idea of a star fort. Usually it's almost like it's a larger city in the shape of a star fort. But yeah, overall I'm quite happy with it, and I think there's actually some really cool detail and overall atmosphere to the city as it looks right now. And I'll probably get some more cinematic shots as the city is completely finished, and I'll make one big video at the end of this complete series. I don't think that's something I've talked about, maybe I have in the past, but yeah, that is definitely on my planning, and in that case I'll definitely want to show off this city a little bit more, especially those little roads that sort of go everywhere. But yeah, that's it for today. I think the next time I'm gonna want to head into this area and maybe start making some farms, but get into some different stuff, because otherwise, quite frankly, it's gonna be pretty repetitive. And given that I'm on such a small map, I sort of want to try all sorts of different things out, so I might very well start trying some tulip fields over here, as well as some more grid pattern like farms, since this really seems like an area which might just be reclaimed from a lake at some point in the recent history. And also what I think I want to get into is a golf course. I think I'm gonna want to place it over here, but a golf course in general is definitely something that I want to get to. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and goodbye, I suppose. Alright, so with that out of the way, I can finally start a proper introduction to this video. Welcome back to City Skylines, and in this episode I'll be taking you through a lot of detailing of the city. There's no specific thing which I'm working on in this episode, in the sense that this is something which I may want to explain a little. I like to divide my episodes into specific things that I'm doing. So for instance, in one episode I'd work on the university, and in another one I'd work on the stadium area and rail yard. But what's sort of a consequence of that is that I try to fill the projects that I do into certain time slots that I can fit into the episodes. And in that, a lot of the smaller stuff really gets like left behind, because it's really the small stuff that I don't want to deal with in those episodes and aren't really part of the larger things that I want to do in episodes, but really are necessary to make the entire city come together, if it were, as a whole. So that's something which I actually wanted to tackle in this episode a little bit, and it includes some of this rock work over here with some foliage around this area, since I really still had this empty field lying around over here and really wanted to make it into a somewhat neat little looking lake, and also want to work on some of the detailing in the university. As I said, I would return to at some point in the future when I built the university. And then there are like a couple of smaller misc things, like also, oh yeah, redoing the football stadium, that's actually a pretty big thing. So yeah, it's generally making the city come together a little bit more and adding some detailing to it. What I do want to say probably about this lake over here is that it's not that Dutch. There are a number of things which I've been looking for in a way to make these lakes look a little bit more Dutch, but one of the issues that I really have with the water system, or had up to this point, is that you can't really get water in without having the rocky slopes on the sides, and you can't really have it be very gentle into the water without getting the sand on the side of the water. And realistically, it would be amazing to just have a grassy slope go into the water. And this is also something where I should explain something about this series in general, which is that I can't build keys yet, and I also can't work with themes at this point in the series, because what's going on is that a couple of weeks ago I really just played City Skylines pretty much 24/7 and got many of these time lapses, but I do want to get them out in a more stable rate and more consistent than just spamming out videos whenever I play the game a lot. And it really just depends on what I want to play, and I have to be quite honest about that. And at the moment, I'm not really playing the game as much because I'm just not feeling like it, and at the time I had a lot of free time, and I was pretty much addicted to City Skylines, so I still have a lot of stuff that I have, but I still need to get through that all, and I still need to actually commentate and put all the videos together, which I should also do a little bit better of a job at when it comes to forgetting to insert these little real-time parts and stuff like that. But that's really beside the point. The point is that there are certain things that I would like to get to at this point in the series, but simply can't because all these episodes are already pre-recorded, so I can't work with the newest update stuff like keys. And at this point in time there weren't really any themes yet either that I could really use. So yeah, those are pretty much things to keep in mind. That said though, I do have a bit of knowledge about what the future episodes are going to be about, so I can actually reflect back on what I said in the real-time part. I said I would work on a golf course, and while I've tried it off screen it didn't really work out that well, and I really would rather have everything that I do build make it somewhat realistic, and not try to push things to an unrealistic look just to get certain things in. For instance, I want to have ditches, but since there aren't really any ditches that can very much look convincingly Dutch, I'd rather have no ditches at all, instead of having ditches that could possibly break the immersion of realism in this case. And much like that, I really felt like the golf course didn't come out good enough to have it in the city. Even though I did sort of like how it looked, it just didn't match well with the rest of the city. That said, I will actually have some flower fields, though they are absolutely a pain to place, so I'm not really sure how much more I'll get of those. And at some point in the future, people have actually hinted towards this, I'll actually be building a theme park, but that's really far in the future. That is the episode that I've just recently recorded, which is, at this point in time, many episodes ahead in the actual series. Alright, now something else which I also wanted to do in this video is place lots of tree lines. Something which I always used to joke about in streams whenever I was streaming this, is that it would pretty much be 50% tree line placement, and it's very true, you do see many of them in the Netherlands. Not as many perhaps as I'm getting around here, but especially around the newer areas you do see a lot of very neatly placed lines of trees, that is windbreakers around farm areas, but also very ornamental tree lines around the city areas. So that's something which I really wanted to have here and there as well, and definitely where I didn't have them yet, I wanted to add some tree lines, and there were still also some unfinished parts here and there, like this very small, almost not so urban area anymore, but it's still really close to the city itself, so I did want to fill that up with some houses. And there was also this little bicycle bridge, which I'm actually really happy about how it turned out in the end. I didn't really have anything fancy to work with, so it's mostly in the shape that I wanted to do it, but it's still something which I think is pretty cool, even though the bicycle bridges in the Netherlands, as applauded as they probably are in the rest of the world, don't really work out that well for cyclists, and a regular roundabout is a lot easier. But regardless, also that you could probably see a major traffic jam right now, and that's one of the issues which I don't think I can really get rid of anymore. Ever since Snowfall got released and Traffic++ doesn't work anymore, I needed to put Traffic++ on Ghost mode to be able to load the city again, and Traffic++ v2 doesn't work, and if I play without Traffic++, the game also doesn't load, so I really needed to load the city. But because of that, I actually lost some functionality, especially the AI functionality, which was pretty important. And because of that, traffic is quite broken, and I might find a way to fix this at some point in the future. And if anybody knows about a way to actually go about doing that, that would be amazing. But at the moment, pretty much the vehicles sometimes don't despawn whenever they get stuck in a certain place, and which causes giant traffic jams all over the place. And in general, the AI is just not as good as I was hoping it to be when I built the road layouts in the city, so traffic jams are a bit of an issue at this point in time. Though then again, my stance on traffic jams is pretty much that the most important thing for the road layout, I think, is to make it realistic and inspired by the Dutch road layouts, and not so much to make it actually functional in the game, because there is much more traffic in the game than there would realistically be in a real city of the same size, which is something that I've definitely commented on about, but it's something which I don't try to think of too much when I'm actually laying down the roads, just because I'd rather just work on the aesthetics rather than trying to get this thing to be as well functioning as it can from a gameplay standpoint. Now, I also wanted to really detail the university a little bit more. This was one of the things which was really nagging me at this point in time, and also something which really stuck out here was with all the extreme rain like reflection, which I'm glad actually got turned down a little bit in the latest update. It's something which I saw the path wasn't entirely finished yet, but I also needed many more trees around that area just to add what I said when I built the university I would do at some point in the future, add some liveliness to it, to make it come alive a little bit more and not feel so dead. And the most easy way to really go about doing so is adding some more trees, which generally makes something look a lot less cold. And I didn't do much else beside that, just some simple path elements, I believe, and a little bit of park bushes and things like that. But aside from that, it's nothing really too special, just densing up the foliage and adding some ornamental foliage here and there to make the general university campus look a little bit more appealing than just one giant plaza of concrete and buildings out of bricks. That's basically the idea behind it. And another thing which I really needed to do, which was quite a disaster over here, is sort of fix those gravel roads, because that was a really ugly sight to look at, which I've said it in the last video, but it's actually a bigger issue in this case. The fact that I can't work with Traffic++ anymore for the time being actually also means that I can't use the pedestrian roads anymore, so I don't have the concrete pedestrian roads anymore, and they've all been replaced automatically by these gravel roads, which are for farmland, so don't work out quite as well. And these are all basically going to be the 1x1 or the one tile roads, which I actually quite like and are quite a bit more realistic too, I think. But it's something which I had to keep in mind when I got back to the university to sort of fix that. And also add some smaller little plazas and relaxation areas here and there, just to make it all feel a little bit more like it's actually a coherent campus and not just a collection of buildings which is really plopped down in a certain way, but with no way to actually connect the buildings and make them feel like one whole, basically. So that's really what I wanted to do with the campus. It's nothing really special, but just a general little makeover of the campus to make it look a little bit more neat. There are, of course, certain things like little tweaking and adding some small details here and there on the campus, which I may want to return to in the future, but if I do stuff like that, I do prefer to do it just off time lapses, because it's not a very time consuming thing and it doesn't translate too well in the time lapse concept, I think, which is really best at portraying a sort of progress, as you see in the episode, which is really why I want to focus on major builds rather than small details and tweaks in time lapses. And another thing which I wanted to add over here is, of course, make the station area look a little bit better, because it was just absolute shit. Well, before this time it wasn't really anything, so that was something which I needed to get back to, and also wanted to actually go back and make a little bus station, because that's something which I didn't really have properly yet. But that's something which you'll see later on in this video. I really just wanted to focus on the area around the station a little bit, not dress it up too much, and I also have to say there's no main transportation hub for this campus or anything special like that, just a very simple station which I quickly got in there, and a small bus stop. I may still want to get a bus stop on the other side of the campus, not just because it's something which is of course quite handy since the campus isn't that small, and I really hate when a campus has just one bus stop, which is the case for the Rotterdam campus, which I have to go to, which can be kind of annoying if you're in a building on the other side of campus and the bus stop is way too far away from that building. So yeah, it's just something which I may want to get back to in the future as well. Now, of course, I wanted to redo the station. Placing down the station is something which I did off camera, just because I wanted to go through a couple of stations. I mean, what am I saying? I'm talking about the stadium, that is the football stadium. I was going through a couple of stadiums in the workshop, and I really just picked this one because it's best size-wise. It's a bit of an annoying model since it also has that road sticking out there and other stuff. And something else which happened over here, as you can see, is that very sudden jump. I think I lost somewhere between like an hour to 2 hours of footage over here due to a crash of fraps for some reason, which was rather annoying. But I basically built the station in this time, as well as the parking area around the station. You can see it glitching a little bit there with the grass, which is something that I don't really know what causes it, but basically every time I place an object around the perimeter of the stadium, it sort of glitches like that and has random grass patches coming out, and at some point in time that'll fix itself, so that's no big problem. But basically what I did around that area was a lot of detailing, redoing the parking lot, and basically making sure I could integrate the station as well as I could into the area around it, because that's one of the main issues I had with this particular model, is even though I do like the station, and why do I keep saying station? I do like the stadium, and it's quite a bit smaller than the Come Now, which is of course a lot better for the scale of the city, but I sort of wanted to work around the roads that it gave you and that little pedestrian bridge which it actually came with, which turned out to not be that big of a problem because I already had a pedestrian bridge running over the highway, so I could actually make use of that. But I wanted to make sure that it was actually integrated into the rest of the area as seamlessly as possible, and without seeming too much like the model actually came with those roads. So that was really the idea behind that. I also wanted to redo some of the foliage over here, which wasn't too necessary. I wanted to redo some of the foliage because I felt it wasn't dense enough in this area and wanted to add a little bit of density to it, but also wanted to redo a couple of trees because this was still in the time when the trees in the game, since the latest snowfall update I believe, were looking very sick and almost lost all their leaves, which wasn't really great, so I wanted to replace all of those, but by this time it's already been fixed again, so that wasn't extremely handy, but it's still something I wanted to do. And also some general extra detailing of the railroad, which also I think works quite well with the new loot which I have. Something I haven't addressed yet is that, yeah, I do also have a new loot with Daylight Classic as well, which I do like a little bit more than the old loots. It's something which I had to get used to a little bit. I'm not sure if it's really more realistic, might be a little less so, but it's a little more saturated and a little bit more contrast. The old one was perhaps a little bit too bright, and it didn't have the colors come out so much, so I do like this one a little bit more to look at, and it's also something which I find in general is more fun to add details to and go a little bit more colorful and detailed with the foliage. So that's also one of the reasons why I think I really went back and redid a lot of the foliage as well, simply because I think it looks a bit better with this loot too. And besides that, I also wanted to take care of the waterfronts the best that I felt I could at this point in time, without being able to get grass or wooden river sides. I figured might as well add some extra rocks here and there and some grass to sort of look like reed, which does the job I guess from a distance but isn't too great from very close up. But I really liked anything more than just a rocky facade at this point in time, I think. So yeah, that's that. I also wanted to add some small pebbles around these rocky facades. There are those textures that you can put on the ground, and one of them is actually, I don't know who made it, so I'm sorry about not giving credit for it, but you can actually blend those pebbles really well, I feel, with the rocky textures that the game comes with, and have those textures blend a little bit more with the grass rather than having just grass and suddenly all the rocks, which is actually something which I really liked as well. And in general, I just wanted to add a lot more foliage over here. It's something which I should have punched myself for looking back at it, because I just used trees that are way too LOD heavy, so this may come back at me at some point in the future, and maybe I shouldn't have used these trees because they're so extremely LOD heavy, but it's something which I really wanted to do because I like the look of them, and I can still go on with this city for quite a while. I'm still planning to at least finish it to the point that it has a general decent area of realistic Dutch looking land somewhat, I feel, around it. And that's still my plan, and that's still how I'm going to try to do it. So there's still quite a few episodes ahead. But yeah, that's it for this episode. So thank you guys for watching it so far. But I do have to say, I do still have a small, well, cinematic camera part in this video, in which I'll finally be able to actually show off what the new stadium looks like without having that time-lapse. And also a couple more shots of the inner city, because I just left that stuff out of the last episode, and I actually still had those lying around on my computer as well. So thank you guys for watching, and see you next time.